my fellow comic book collectors. This is going to be a new series that I'm just starting, and it's on investing in comics. Generally, when we think of investing in comics, we think of the high end comics, the 9/8, the 9/9s, the tens of comics. But what I'm going to focus on in this series is not the high end; it's the low end, and it's going to be comics that are a grade of 3 or less. So these are like what are considered the low grade comics. And is there a market there? Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a story that's not related to comics, but hopefully it'll be a good illustration of where I'm going with this whole idea that I'm going to try to give you. So the idea is this. Well, I run my own business, and that's how I can afford a lot of the comics that I have. But one of the ways that I actually made the most money in my career is actually through selling and buying and selling houses. Now, I found when each house, as I kind of progressed, I bought like bigger and bigger houses. What happened was the first house, it took like a few months to sell. And I was like, oh, it's so slow. It took like a month, almost 2 months to sell. I was like, so slow. I thought that was slow at the time. And then the next house, which was a bit bigger, took 3-4 months to sell, and so forth. It was slower as the house got more and more pricey because the market. What happens is as you get more pricey with the house, well, there's a fewer number of people that can afford that higher end house. And my house before I moved into this house, my last house was actually a very pricey house. It was like a $4 million house. And the market was really, really slow. It took me over a year to sell the house, almost two years to sell my house. And so it was really slow. And it just was like, oh, wow, am I ever going to sell? And that's what sort of happens at the very high end of the market. Yes, you can get that big money, but it's very slow to realize that big money. So as an investor, you're holding out for that big sale. And that is kind of the same as for comics, because what happens is as you get higher and higher in that price point with comics, especially with the 9/8 of some like major keys, well, the number of people that can afford those keys is very, very small. However, people still want to get those keys, and there's actually a huge market for those keys. But most people can't afford those high prices. So what they'll do is they'll get the lower end. So what I've noticed, having been collecting for several years now, over 30 years actually, is that the low end keys actually are almost the same price as the mid grade keys. So there's very little jump until you get to that high 9/8 or whatever. But there's really little jump between like a low grade and mid grade. And there is some jump, of course, but my point is it's not as much as you might think. And it kind of leads me to believe that people just want to get that key. And they're willing to pay a little bit more, even though it's maybe not the greatest grade, than they might they might otherwise pay for a comic. And I'm going to show you some of the ones in the behind me are all low grades. But they're all major keys. And this series that I'm going to do, I'm going to go through all my major keys that are in low grade. And I'm going to show you how the prices have changed over the years. And with that, I'm going to show you whether or not you can invest in a lower grade. Because if you think about it, the price point that you're getting in on is a much lower price, and the potential for return might be actually higher. So I'm going to show you that. I know that a lot of the comic channels, when they focus on these kind of keys, they always talk about the big sale. Well, I'm going to talk to you about the little sale and the sale that maybe you can afford if you put maybe a little bit of effort to buy a major key, but in a low grade. Still expensive, but not necessarily that expensive, like not the $1 million range, more like the few $1,000 range. So hopefully you'll enjoy this video. I'm going to show you my first. I'm going to be doing like a bunch of these videos. So this is the first in the series. Hope you enjoy it. And this is my worst comic, my worst and best comic in a way. It is my X-Men #1. Now this it's a complete book actually. It says a 0.5. It's a very low grade. That's the lowest you can get with still being a blue label. It is like the worst, the worst of the worst. So this is the minimum entry level to get a complete blue label book on CGC, and it is really rough. The reason it's a 0.5 instead of a 1 is the fact that it's just mangled. People wrote all over it. It's got a major spine roll. It's like the spine's probably detached. Cover and center, two center wraps detached. Tape on the interior, bad shape. But I really wanted this key. I was so excited to get this. And even though it's really in rough shape, it was kind of a cool comic to get. And a lot of people, when they collect comics, they are willing to pay a little extra for that key. Now I paid $2,000 for this last year. So mid last year. So it's really rough. As I said, it's a major key, but it's really rough. So I want to show you how this comic fared in that time period. Now, comics are a little bit crazy right now, I have to admit, that the market is very, very hot, very, very active. It seems like a lot of people during this whole lockdown period are really looking at comics as an investment tool. And that makes this video that I'm doing right now even that much more relevant, because it's the low keys that actually have a huge amount of potential, because they're entry level books that people can afford that have the ability to go up because there's a huge market for them and huge demand, and therefore that demand creates increase in price. So we're going to talk about this book. I'm going to show you the pricing and show you how the 9.8 compares to the 0.5 like as an investment tool. So whenever you look at investment, you look at I spent X dollars, what was my return? And I'm going to show you live examples of this. So hopefully you'll enjoy this series. So I just opened up another screen with a Go Collect. Now Go Collect will show you that there is no 9.8 for X-Men #1. There's no 9.6 either. Like there's none on the census that have, well actually there's 2 on the census, but just no recent sales of those high grades. And so they estimate the value is around almost $1 million for 9.8 of X-Men #1. So pretty expensive book. Now let's go way down to the 0.5. I paid actually under 2,000. I think it was around 1,900 after all the everything included. So even my copy has gone up from middle of last year to it's gone up about $400. Okay, so not bad. I made like a 20% return, a little bit more than 20% return if I want to sell it right now based on fair market value. And usually these numbers, you don't see these numbers. Usually people charge even more than this number that you see here. Probably I could sell it at 2,500 or something crazy like that. It is a bit higher than what you see here. But using these numbers alone, you still see a 20% return. Now, one of the cool features within Go Collect, I really like Go Collect as a pricing vehicle, like it's a good program to use, is you can press on Dive Deeper. Now what you can see is the sales. Now you'll notice there's been none of these high graded sales recently. And there was actually 8.5 that sold, but it sold for less. It actually went down 1.2%. Okay, that's pretty, when you're spending that much money. I mean, a 8.5, that's like 100,000 or something crazy, right? 8.5 is 50,000. Okay, so big money you're spending. And then we look at the lower grades. The mid grade, 55. This one performed really well. But look at the really low grades. 1.5 sold for, it went up 85%. A 0.5 went up 53%. So these really low grades, even though they're like the worst, graded comics, they still go up fairly significantly in price. So, maybe buying like 10 like low grades would be better than having that like high grade of X-Men. You could, 10 equivalent books. So the point is that you should never look down upon the low grades, because they actually might be the opportunity that you might not have realized, that they actually have this potential to be a good investment. So a 53% return on a on a comic is a pretty great return on investment, especially within a year. So this has just been a quick synopsis of this one comic, but I'm going to look at about 20 comics in the whole series. There's about, and maybe more if I feel like the series is popular, I'll expand this out. But this is really just looking at my X-Men #1 and as an investment tool. So, I'm happy to have this, and I recommend, get that grail that you always wanted. And if you can't afford that high-end one, get the low-end one. And it might actually be the better of the investments. So that wants to get it all. I want to get all the comics of all the different major characters that I like. And this was one of the ones that I really, really wanted in life. And it's one of those ones where maybe I'll sell it later and get a slightly higher grade or a slightly better one, or maybe even a restored copy. I'm not too shy about getting restored copies. But for now, this is my cool comic that may be the worst comic in my collection in terms of grade, but it's still cool. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Check out, this is going to be an ongoing series. I hope you enjoyed the series. Please give me some feedback about the series, and check out my other videos on this topic about investing in low grade comics. So thanks for watching.